The News and Public Affairs Department of WSFA TV presents Composite, a look at people, places, and things of interest to Alabamians. Your host for Composite is Jay Lewis.
Good evening. This is a special edition of Composite designed to deal with a special problem, the lingering effects of the Bernard Whitehurst case. State, county, and city officials in Montgomery are eager for the Whitehurst case to end, but it has not ended, and indications are that it may be just beginning. Illegal possession of weapons, planting of guns and drugs, cover-ups and lying, political infighting and opportunism, those are the hallmarks of the current crisis in Montgomery. In this special composite presentation, we'll quickly recap the events leading up to the present, put these into perspective, and explain why we feel the Whitehurst case will be of major community concern in the future. With reports tonight are Bob Howell, Norman Lumpkin, and Clark Edwards. First, Bob Howell recounts the genesis of the controversy.
On Tuesday, December 2nd, 1975, an armed black man robbed this store and ran away carrying a small amount of cash. More than a dozen police officers answered the call to 222 West Jeff Davis Avenue. They fanned out and searched for a black male in the area on foot. A short time later, a black man was picked up and taken back to the store to be identified by the owner, who said it was not the right man. A few minutes later, officers spotted another suspect who hid under a house on Holcomb Street. One policeman ordered the man to come out, and when he did not, fired a warning shot under the house. The suspect fled from under the house and ran across the street. It was in the back corner of the yard on the west side of Holcomb Street in a thickly grown-up area that police officer Donnie Foster shot and killed the suspect. Foster later testified he returned fire at the suspect after the black man shot at him. The suspect was Bernard Whitehurst, 32 years old, a man well known by many of the police officers who worked the predominantly black neighborhood around the city curb grocery, but he did not rob the store. The investigation, which was begun in the time before Whitehurst's body was taken from the scene, would come back to haunt many of the officers who participated in it. They would become involved in an alleged cover-up. Allegations would be lodged against them, saying a gun was planted by one of them. And later, the investigation would carry all the way to the top of the police department. In the series of events following the death of Bernard Whitehurst, 3 officers would be indicted on charges they lied in connection with the gun found by the body. One would be tried, and later all 3 would leave the department. The principals in the case would be subjected to polygraph tests, and some would not pass the questions asked about the shooting of Bernard Whitehurst. And the major break would occur between the police department and the district attorney's office. Here is a synopsis of some of the people involved in the case and what has happened to them since the shooting. Colonel Ed Wright, Public Safety Director, resigned February 5th after failing polygraph questions about the Whitehurst case and the alleged planted gun. Colonel Wright was replaced by Lieutenant General Alvin Gillum. Chief Charles Swindle passed the majority of his polygraph test questions, remains as chief of the Montgomery Police Department. Captain Grady Arnett passed his test questions and remains on the force. Lieutenant Wesley Strain, initially second in command at the scene of the shooting, resigned January 27th rather than take the polygraph tests. Detective C.H. Humphrey testified he took the gun from the scene to police headquarters. He was fired February 18th after failing the polygraph test questions. Detective Don Johnson testified he was the first detective to reach the scene of the shooting and to see the gun. He resigned January 27th rather than take the tests. Detective Thomas Lideker, indicted for perjury in connection with the Whitehurst gun. His trial ended in a hung jury. He was fired by the city January 27th for not taking the polygraph test. Detective Ronald Bush, indicted for perjury in a gun testimony, forced to resign December 5th after a nightclub fight. Detective Richard Kerner, indicted for perjury, fired by the city January 27th for not taking the polygraph tests. Sergeant W.C. Segrist, involved in the investigation, fired by the city February 18th after failing the polygraph test questions. Sergeant Harold Hicken passed the polygraph tests and remains on the force.
Composite will return with 3 key figures in the case.
Composite is brought to you in part by the merchants of LaCroix Shopping Village, a great place to shop.
I heard you're going to move.
Sure am.
Already called a realtor? Sure did. Same folks we got this place through.
House market can be pretty tricky.
I know.
Got to get your money out of it.
For sure.
They need to bring out the buyers.
They will.
Handle all the work and worry.
They do.
Who is it?
Louder.
Who is it?
Louder Realty, the home folks.
You really do like Louder.
I like Louder.
My dad brings me to Sambo's because it has a great menu, right?
Wrong. Two great menus, yours and mine.
Just what the family ordered.
We come to Sambo's because I got tired of hamburgers and fries for dinner. But he didn't.
Just what the family ordered.
Sambo's gives us just what we need. Lots of choices.
At a little check.
Of course, one of the nicest things for me is the service.
Just what the family ordered. Sambo's.
The Whitehurst case has become curiously entwined with not only law enforcement, but also with the local legislative and judicial processes. Having accomplished that, there's no way it could avoid becoming a political issue as well. This week, in separate interviews, the three political figures who have become involved explained their sides of the issues. Montgomery Mayor Jim Robinson, Attorney General Bill Baxley, and District Attorney Jimmy Evans. Here's a composite of what they had to say.
Well, I think everybody with walking around sense came to understand that obviously something happened up there. I was assured and reassured that the people that were involved in the police department were not involved. They told the truth. I think that when I got before the grand jury and saw a grand jury that really was dedicated to getting to the bottom of it and gave some assurances that both sides would step back a step and take a fresh, objective look at it, I found a grand jury that could get to the bottom of it, and that's when we
Well, did you have any doubts about the original grand jury, the one that indicted Kerner, Lideker, and Bush?
No, I didn't. I don't have any problem getting along with grand juries. I just have problems whenever I see the police department and other agencies in law enforcement kind of backbiting one another and not really allowing the judicial process to take its course. Now, I believe the judicial process should take its course. That's what our country was founded upon, that people are innocent until proven guilty, and that was the assumption we were proceeding upon. When the judicial process did not render a decision, and obviously, as I said, in my walking around sense, knew that it bogged down, and something had to be done.
How high, in your opinion, did that cover-up go?
Well, that would be a hard question for me to answer. Certainly, in my opinion, and it went to the top in the police department, and the mayor has now gotten rid of his public safety director. Now, that's just my opinion. I don't want to say charge anybody with anything without a trial or try them in the press. But certainly, if on February the 11th, when the scheme was concocted to tell everybody in the grand jury that the gun was left in the apartment of 3 defendants, and their own records down there showed that the gun was part of the evidence in that drug raid, which happened 2 years before Whitehurst was killed. Certainly that ought to send somebody a message, but it didn't. And meetings with mayor in May, April. He testified before 3 or 4 grand juries. He had private conversations with myself, with the Attorney General, the Assistant Attorney General, Assistant District Attorneys. He had a conversation with the United States District Attorney, and everybody told him that there was something wrong down there, and something needed to be, he needed to do something about it.
Do you say that the mayor then was derelict in not taking some action before the final agreement, before the grand jury was signed?
J. Lewis, all of Montgomery, Alabama knows that. And yes, I feel that way.
We were talking to Mr. Evans about the issues concerning the Whitehurst case. I simply said to him, as I would say to you now, and at that particular point, you had 3 indictments. At that particular point, you had several grand juries had looked at it, and there wasn't a single indictment that came out of those several grand juries concerning anything in the Whitehurst case. And the only indictments that ever came were the ones concerned with perjury. And I simply said to him, as I'd say to you now, let the judicial system work. Let justice be served. You know, at first blush, police officers, you know, really have the right to be considered innocent until proven guilty. But as it progressed, it became obvious that somebody was lying, that the judicial process would not work. And obviously something had to be done. And that's when I found the grand jury that would simply sit down and say, okay, both sides back off and quit harassing each other, and that is exactly what was happening.
And that's the grand jury that approved the so-called agreement between you and Attorney General Baxley.
That is correct.
Can you tell me...
That was the grand jury's, that agreement was drawn up by that grand jury.
Well, you've got a different situation here than you do in your ordinary type case. You've got a situation that's almost analogous to a public official in office. When we start a prosecution against a public official, our number one goal, if once we're convinced the man's guilty, our number one goal is not necessarily to put that person in the penitentiary, which you do through a criminal case, but it's to remove that person from office. The office he holds, if he's doing something that neglects his duty or that's harmful to the public or abusing or misusing that office. And it's almost the same when you got a law enforcement officer. Your primary goal is to, once you're convinced they're guilty of bad wrongdoing, not just simple mistakes or mistakes in judgment, the number one goal should not be necessarily to send them to the penitentiary. That's something you want to do only as a last resort when you have to. It's to get them out of a position where they can misuse their authority.
But is it fair to allow that person to go free with a pension if he has earned it, or with a simple dismissal, while you would prosecute criminally another person for essentially the same offense?
Well, you've got to get back to what your goal is, and your goal has got to be weighed against the practical result. And the practical result is, we tried the case once, we had a mistrial. If we continue to try it till you keep having mistrials, eventually you might get an acquittal. And once that's done, then you're through as far as any cleaning up in the department. You're through as far as straightening it out and getting those people that are responsible for that type of thing out of there. So you got to weigh more than just the strictly legal sense. You've got to weigh the practical effects of it and then arrive at what you think is the best solution possible from the circumstances, which we did.
We had a grand jury composed of just regular people there. People who had read and heard charges and counter-charges and backbiting by the police and backbiting by the DA's office. And they were concerned that we had a problem in our community. And they got together and they wanted to find a solution. And I commend that grand jury for being a wide-awake, electric group that listened and made their own mind up. And whether or not it's legal is not really what we're talking about, and I don't think it's what you're talking about. But to me, it represents a feeling of the people of this community. They wanted an end to this matter. They wanted the truth as best they could get at it. The judicial process had broken down and was bogged up in the mud around its axles. It wouldn't have moved another step, and everybody concerned knew very well that there were never going to be any convictions out of the Whitehurst case, for one reason or another. And you can go off in 40 different directions and start talking about why there might not have been any convictions. But there weren't going to be any.
Is that why, then, that immunity was offered in the face of the lie detector test?
That's why the grand jury said they would ask Mr. Baxter not to request that the judge in all prosecute cases, because there weren't going to be any convictions. You know, you had a locked jury already. And that really wasn't on, that was on the perjury charges and not on the elements of the Whitehurst case. But like I said to you in the beginning, anybody with walking around sense could understand that something happened. And that's why I agreed in the agreement to require the police officers to take lie detector tests. I don't think that lie detectors are a full and adequate substitution for our judicial process. Let me tell you something. When the judicial process gets bogged down, and whoever causes it to get bogged down has got to accept the responsibility for the actions that follow. Because the people of this community were not going to sit still with nothing being done. Right. And that's why we got into it.
District Attorney Evans, he refused to sign the agreement that set up the arrangement by which the people had to take polygraph tests and were either dismissed, fired, or kept on.
Why did he tell you that he was refusing to sign it?
I'd rather you ask him that.
Did he tell you?
Yes, he did.
All right, you have urged him to take a polygraph test on the basis of that agreement.
Oh,
Why?
no. Jimmy taking the polygraph has nothing at all to do with that agreement.
I did not prepare the agreement. I had nothing to do with the preparation of it. That was prepared in my absence. 2, I did not negotiate it. I had nothing to do with negotiation of the agreement. It was negotiated in my absence. I did not sign the agreement. Other parties signed it. We all know who signed it, but I did not sign it. I have no obligation or compunction to perform in any way under the auspices of that agreement. And I'm not going to say or do anything which will lead the public to believe that their district attorney had anything to do with the negotiation, preparation, and performance and execution of that agreement. I'm just not going to do that. Now, no matter how Mr. Robinson, Mr. Farmer want me to be a party to that agreement, I am not.
Well, now you said, and I think I'm quoting you correctly, in an interview about a week and a half ago that the next thing is for Jimmy Evans to take the polygraph test.
Yes, Jimmy came in and told the grand jury nothing to do with that particular agreement or separate and apart from that agreement. That he wanted to take a polygraph, wanted members of his office to, and so that was something that the city jumped on, and that was how the ball started rolling towards getting the city to do what they did.
Do you still want him to take that polygraph test?
It's not me wanting him to. It's something that Jimmy came in and agreed to do to the grand jury.
So you're not pressing it one way or the other?
Well, I'm going to fulfill what I feel like the grand jury wanted me to do, and that's make the thing available and set up the arrangements for him.
But you do not care personally whether he takes it or not?
Well, I'm just assuming, as far as I know, that he is.
Has he told you otherwise?
No.
Well, now, the Attorney General and I talked about a polygraph test. We did. And there was some talk about me taking it as an inducement to get others to take a polygraph test. The only ironclad understanding that I had with the Attorney General was, and I wrote him a letter to this effect, was that if those persons who were accused by the grand jury of perjury and lying to the grand jury and the cover-up and the gun planning and the dope planning by the body of Bernard Whitehurst would take a polygraph test and pass it, and it showed that they had not been lying to the grand jury or trying to cover up, then I would take one. And that's the understanding I had with the Attorney General. Other than that, I had no other understandings with him.
Under what ground rules would he be taking such a polygraph test? In other words, what would be asked? What is he accused of having done that the polygraph might
The grand
reveal?
jury just drew up certain questions that had to do with some of these allegations that the police department, or some members of the police department, had bannered around that really found no evidence of support, but the questions have to do with those allegations.
You mean the allegations regarding drugs?
A number of things that they brought up before the grand jury.
But there would be nothing concerning specifically the Whitehurst case involved in that?
I think some of the questions would, but I don't think it'd be anything. It was nothing that was serious as to go forward any further with the investigation.
But you have not communicated with Jimmy Evans on this matter since in the past couple of weeks.
I wrote him a letter.
What did you ask him in the letter?
To just let me know when he could take the polygraph.
Has he responded to that?
No.
Are you aware of any accusations made against you publicly that would be the subject of a polygraph test if you took it?
Well, I can only say that what the perjurers and gun planners and dope planners had to say, and of course that's been in the media. They held a demonstrations which consisted of defense lawyers for the defendants, organized and political paraphernalia paid for by a city council member, Mr. Farmer, and they had character witnesses and witnesses for the perjured defendants holding this so-called citizens committee, and the officer that stood up and made the allegations has now flunked the polygraph test, I understand, and said he lied during the trial. and has admitted that the gun and the dope was planted by Bernard Whitehurst. So those are the things, and I've been exonerated from all that. Even if I hadn't had the grand jury to say I was exonerated, I think the mere fact that they have now admitted there was a cover-up, and I've been right all along.
You got to remember that law enforcement isn't just the Montgomery Police Department. It's the DA's office, it's the municipal court, it's the circuit court, courts of appeals, Supreme, right on up. And when any part of that breaks down, law enforcement breaks down. And we've absolutely had two segments of the law enforcement process to break down, that being the police department and the DA's office, in my judgment, and in the judgment of the people of this community, I might add.
Do you feel that the credibility of your office has been damaged to the point that you could not effectively prosecute cases?
But I'll just refer you then, if that's it, the question, to the last grand jury report, February 3rd grand jury report since the Baxley-Robertson-Falmer agreement. And says the grand jury would like to go on record as commending the district attorney and all of his staff in presenting the cases before this jury, and it was handled in a most thorough and efficient manner. So the grand juries of this county...
Now, that is not a grand jury over which you presided.
Oh, yes, sir. It certainly is. And my members of my staff, I don't see how the grand jury could observe me and my staff any other way to write such a report if I hadn't been there. And my staff hadn't been there to work with them. I don't preside over the grand jury. I work with him as their attorney.
So you think that your office can now function effectively?
My office has functioned effectively, Mr. Lewis. If it hadn't been for me, there'd have been a cover-up of this thing. Nobody'd ever known about it. Because all it would have taken was one word from the district attorney, one or two little old sentences, that we don't have enough evidence in this case back in February. That's all it would have taken. We wouldn't have had this problem. But I did this for the people of Montgomery, because if they can do that to a dead black man who happens to be psychotic and get away with it, then they can do it to you, Mr. Lewis, for what you might write or what you might want to print. They can do it to the sons and daughters of people out there.
Law enforcement had broken down, and we've got to get back where we're providing protection for the man on the street, protection for people in their homes, and you got to get where the police department's not preoccupied with beating this matter of the Whitehurst case to death over and over again, or beating the cover-up to death, or I hope we can get back. It's going to take some mature acting on the part of the police department and the DA's office and everybody else concerned.
On a philosophical basis, do you feel that we have gotten to the bottom of it? Do you feel that we've completed the job of concluding the Whitehurst case?
Well, I know in my own mind now what happened in the matter, and I think that we've arrived at a just result, one that might not satisfy everybody. I don't think the public really understands exactly what happened in the Whitehurst case. I don't think they have, a lot of the people that I talk to doesn't understand what you're talking about and the different issues involved.
There are major new developments that seem to ensure that there is a future to the Whitehurst case. That information when we return.
Composite with Jay Lewis will continue following these messages.
Here's a better idea. Your 77 Ford dealer limited edition sale with great value like the new 77 limited edition Granada. The car that looks like a Mercedes-Benz now comes sale priced when specially equipped with white sidewalls, deluxe wheel covers and accent stripes, deluxe flight bench seat and digital clock. Ford's pace-setting sales leader Granada, specially priced for extra value. Buy or lease now at your Ford dealer limited edition sale. It's a better idea.
LaCroix Shopping Village is great for shopping. For the best in pianos and organs, LaCroix features Deloach Music Company, your exclusive Baldwin dealer, offering an entire line of fine pianos and organs and lessons by qualified instructors. The sound investment is Baldwin at Deloach Music Company. And for bed and bath, the Bedpost is in LaCroix, specializing in designer spreads, matching drapes, and the finest accessories for a beautiful bath. Find all those special touches at the Bedpost in LaCroix Shopping Village, a great place to shop.
With me in the studio are Clark Edwards and Norman Lumpkin. The question is that of the future. Clark?
There are two issues that this community is going to be hearing a lot about in the future, more on the Whitehurst shooting and its cover-up, and the second on the controversy between the investigations and upcoming investigations. First, the shooting the polygraphs. Highlights of the polygraph results released this week indicate that police officers Segrist, Humphrey, and former safety director Ed Wright knew about the availability of a throwdown gun and knew of a cover-up of the shooting attempt. The polygraph results collected indicate several knew about a cover-up, and they are Sergeant Segrist, former Public Safety Director Ed Wright, Detectives Humphrey, Kerner, Lideker, and Bush. Other resignations that are related to the Whitehurst case are Detective Don Johnson, Lieutenant Wesley Strain, Detective Ray Latham, and Danny Phillips, the patrolman. Officer William E. Jones, one of the first officers at the scene to say that he had not seen a gun, left the department during the controversy, but he has since returned. There may be some more prosecution of those involved in the shooting and the cover-up in the future. District Attorney Jimmy Evans.
You're not ruling out the possibility of seeking indictments based on past actions?
Of course not. The federal people have already contacted me, and I have turned over information in my office to the federal people. I don't know what they're doing, but whatever the federal government does or anybody else does not going to prevent me from doing whatever I think my duty is to the grand jury and to the people.
There's been no indication from the Attorney General that his office will break the agreement that no charges will be brought by his office in the Whitehurst matter. The $5 million civil suit against the city by the Whitehurst family is being appealed. A federal jury ruled for the city and said Patrolman Foster killed Whitehurst in the line of duty, and the family was not entitled to any damages. They had charged that he was wrongfully killed. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans is expected to rule by July, and another trial is anticipated in the fall. The appeal procedure could be halted if there is an out-of-court settlement. We've learned that an offer has been made to the city and it's now being considered. Federal authorities have been gathering documents pertaining to the case since the announcement of the first polygraph results. They've copied records from the district attorney's office, the city attorneys, and the records of attorney Donald Watkins, counsel for the Whitehurst family. Justice Department representatives have also been seen at the Holcomb Street site behind the houses where Whitehurst was shot. There's a possibility that perjury indictments may result from the federal probe. Charges of deprivation of civil rights could be brought in the shooting of the 32-year-old man, and charges of criminal obstruction of justice could possibly be brought. In terms of legal action, civil and criminal actions could be possible in the 12 months for the Whitehurst affair. That is what citizens of this community may face. Over the next few months, police consultants will be inspecting the Montgomery Police Department's operation and can be expected to look at management, street supervision, equipment needs, and the training program will also be reviewed. One visiting consultant has already said training should be expanded and pointed out that the current radio communication system used by the police is outdated and won't cover the city effectively. A list of recommendations will be given to Mayor Robinson, and one recommendation could be a request for a complete management study that could cost the city $60,000 to $70,000. There's a possibility that the grand jury that okayed the now controversial agreement will attempt to reconvene independently. Many members are said to be angered over statements by District Attorney James Evans pertaining to his taking of the polygraph test. What the jury members plan to do or how they plan to do it is unclear at this time. Jay?
Thank you, Norman. Clark? There are still unanswered questions. Who had the Whitehurst gun? Where are the other two guns seized in the same drug raid that the Whitehurst gun came from? Who really planted the gun and the drugs? Who has withheld evidence and who is still withholding it? What steps have been taken to ensure that it will not happen again? And perhaps the biggest question of all, since there have definitely been crimes committed and absolutely no punishment inflicted, has the Alabama criminal justice system failed to do its job, leaving the federal government to take corrective action? We can't answer those questions. Some of them, perhaps, will never be answered. But we hope Composite has provided you with some of the answers to questions you've had concerning the Bernard Whitehurst case. Next Saturday evening at 6:30, watch for Teletax. Experts from the Internal Revenue Service will be here live in our studios to answer questions you call in about your federal income taxes. That's Teletax next Saturday evening at 6:30. For Composite, I'm Jay Lewis.
The News and Public Affairs Department of WSFA TV has presented Composite with Jay Lewis. Composite was recorded on tape for presentation at this time. Composite has been brought to you in part by the merchants of LaCroix Shopping Village, a great place to shop.